Great. Right, so I'll be discussing the whole idea of moving from the benchtop to the conveyor belt, that is commercialization of scientific innovations. And this is quite important. Of course, my presentation will be to the point and sharp. So you have a bright idea, and of course, I'm a scientist, so and I'm a lab person, so I will always be referring to the lab instead of saying the field. So you have a bright idea, and of course, you're doing your exploratory work, and you want to apply this idea for the improvement of mankind, as we like to put it. Of course, there are some hurdles that you need to cross, and that's what I would like to just to discuss briefly. Well, the hurdles are a few. Of course, you have to start out with the discovery or the innovation, and then you have some sort of disclosure, whether it be with your group or your intellectual property section or your department, and then evaluation, protection, marketing, and then now you decide, well, to do. You go with this after marketing. Do you go to licensing, or do you go to some sort of spin-off like a startup company? I just want to look at these important steps and how to handle them. Of course, the discovery is what most scientists find to be fun, myself included in that. Working in the lab, coming up with these fascinating new things. And you can take this from, you can use two approaches. You can use the top down or the bottom up. And I kind of just put this together. One of them might seem a little bit crazy, but it's not, because I know of a guy that actually used the crazy one and it went quite well. The top down, of course, is most popular because you would start off with a problem. You would identify a problem which is of local or global significance, something like diabetes, and you probably say that, okay, you'll work on some anti-diabetic drugs or some anti-cancer drugs, or you make some sort of hydrogen storage material or light absorbing material, and then you work your way towards the development. And of course, you would need to identify the fundamental causes, or just the fundamentals of the problem that you are working on. You look at possible solutions and you investigate these solutions, and based on your findings, you decide where you will go from there. And this is the logical, I think this is probably a logical way, and that's how I see it, probably the most logical way. But then you could also go from an exploratory end. You could start off basically exploring an area which is topical, and then you will come up with something from that. Or you look at where it is going, and then you say, okay, how can I apply these findings? I know of two guys. One of them, I worked in the lab beside him at Weizmann in Israel, Reshef Tene, who is noted as the father and founder of inorganic nanotubes. And he now has a company that makes use of these nanotubes as lubricants. Now, when I spoke to him about the inorganic nanotubes, and he was basically showing me all of his stuff, and he did a lot of work, of course. He never started out wanting to produce lubricants. He was basically fascinated with nanotubes and nanomaterials. And so he went, he was exploring, and then he went off on a tangent where he discovered the inorganic nanotubes, and he did a lot of work in that area. And so he realized that, look, these things can be used as lubricants, right? So that is like the bottom-up approach working out. Another guy, which is the professor that I worked with there, Jacob Sagiv, who is listed as the father and founder of artificial molecular self-assembly. He used this approach. He was basically exploring these octadecyl silanes and realize that they always order themselves in a particular way. And now he has about 3 patents on this type of thing. And they are being explored for usage in semiconductors and superconductors and stuff like that. So it's an example of, I guess, maybe the atypical method working out. What if you're not a scientist though? What if you're not a you're an applied scientist? What do? You could approach a scientist, and this is important because a lot of brilliant ideas are out there floating around. And you could approach somebody and have a discussion with them. Now, of course, people are worried about their ideas getting stolen, and this is important. And this is why we have what we call a non-disclosure agreement. To say, look, whatever we discuss, it is between us. All right? That's it. We sign that up. You have a copy, I have a copy, or the parties involved in the discussion have copies of this agreement to protect the idea. So, and I'm saying this to say that persons who have these brilliant ideas or what they believe could be useful ideas could approach people who they know could help them out. If you are interested in, let's say, extracting stuff from whatever plant materials and looking at the application of such materials or such chemical compounds in the biological world, then you could approach, I guess, maybe a natural products chemist, a biochemist, a botanist to help with that and other ideas. And so the discovery, as I said, is important and can be approached from a number of angles. Of course, a lot of scientists tend to stop here after the discovery because the other steps to get to commercialization, it's a lot, and it involves dealing with or interacting significantly with people outside of science. And a lot of scientists are not really interested in that type of thing because it takes them away from the lab sometimes, especially if they don't have, let's say, an organization or a group to really deal with that aspect of the work. And so we have a lot of discoveries in chemistry, and I'm sure in the other departments, brilliant discoveries, those just sitting on the shelves. We need to, when you make your invention or your innovation, you need to also do a disclosure, as I mentioned in the scheme earlier. And this part can be tricky. You can have a public or private. Now, of course, once a year, once a person hear public disclosure of their invention, people kind of get a little bit worried because you invent something new and you're just going to throw it out there. Somebody might steal it. And this is a valid concern. It's a valid concern, but I have seen one case where and it's from the same Jacobs I give, the first paper on molecular self-assembly of these octadecyl silane. It was published, and several years later, he got the patent, got the material patented. It wasn't a part of his thesis or anything like that when he was at Max Planck. But he published this paper, and several years later, after a little bit more work, he was able to patent. Of course, most persons will say, look, don't publish it if you intend to patent. A little bit tricky. That is true. You have to be careful. The private disclosure now is basically, confidential communication, probably within your research group or your department, right? Or the university's IP section. I know UW have a section that deals with this type of thing, right? And because I've been in communication with them before, so I know for a fact that this group exists to help scientists with, intellectual property protection, that type of thing, right? How you get your stuff patented and all of that. So private disclosure, generally people ensure that there's some sort of non-disclosure agreement in place. don't discuss what we, don't expose the work to anybody else. Don't expose this discussion to anybody else, and everybody would sign up and have their documentation. And this is wise. Evaluation is very, very important. It's a very important step, because this is where money starts. Well, from the beginning there is money, but this is where you're going to need some raw cash up front. Evaluation will look at, is this thing even worth patenting? Because yes, you might make a discovery, but then you start to ask yourself, okay, we are going to patent it. It's going to cost us some cash immediately, right? Are we going to be able to sell this thing? So for example, let's say you go in the lab and you synthesize a new compound. You don't know exactly the application of the compound immediately. What are you going to do with it? You don't know that. You don't know what it could be used for. To run and patent it, that might be tricky, because then you might patent it and there's not much market value, especially in the moment. So there might be market value 10 years later, 50 years later, who knows? But you have to evaluate. All right? So you have to look at whether or not the discovery is worth patenting. Can the discovery be patented? All right, based on how it is set up. What is the market like? So if it can be patented and it has some market value, right? What is the market like? Who will you market this to? Okay. And you have to check out if they are competing inventions. Once you start to talk about market, are there competing inventions? So let's say, for example, you invent some sort of antibacterial gel for the face, right? Antibacterial face cream, let's call it that. There are other such creams out there. What are the advantages of your cream, if any? Right? So you have to look at the fact that they are competing inventions. Okay? Can the stuff be patented? Stuff like that. So that's where the evaluation part comes in, because and generally this is done inside the group, but also your IP section will look at that. All right? Are the people spending the money to do the patenting? Because they're not going to just shell out money and say, okay, go and patent. They want to know, okay, if we spend let's say 15,000, 40,000 US to patent, and of course these things are affected by the size of your organization, the type of patenting that you do. People want to know that if they spend a certain amount, something will come back, and they generally want it now. So that's, evaluation is critical. Of course, protection, right? So you evaluate and realize that, look, this is good. We can really, this is going somewhere. We can use this for something. Of course, you say, okay, then we need to patent it. We could go international versus local in terms of patenting. Of course, we generally go international, because you want your stuff to be protected, not just locally, but in other parts of the world. Okay? And for example, people like to do the US patent because the US has signed on also to a number of patent treaties which allow their stuff to be basically international. Of course, a patenting strategy must be established. Generally, your IP office, your intellectual property office, our section would know about this type of thing, and we also know about managing the patent. Of course, a strategy for prosecution of the patent must be established, meaning that you have somebody basically watching to see if anybody is infringing, are making use of your patent without permission, and how you would deal with such a situation. All right, you call it, because I know of one case where one person had a patent and somebody was using it and they were making money from it, and so this person just went to the intellectual property office of the organization and informed them, and then they reached out to the person and said, look, we see that you're using some stuff that we have, we have patented. We have to sort this out. And the agreement at the end of the day was that, look, for every batch of the stuff you manufacture, give us X amount of it. So the manufacturer was sending over a certain amount of the product, because the holder of the patent was still making use of the material for further research. So each time the manufacturer produced, they would send over a few bottles of the compound, and that's how they settled that. Of course, there are other ways. You could say, look, you have to give us X percentage or so. So in patenting, of course, there are different types. You have a provisional patent, which basically says, hold my space in the line, I'll be back to, or hold my date, I'll be back to get a full patent. And you have your design patent, and you have your basic patent. And there are others. Now, marketing / commercialization of your discovery. So you could outsource your marketing, and this depends on where you want to go with your discovery. You have protected your stuff, you have done your evaluation and all of that, and you say that, look, this thing is worth protecting, patenting, and you did your patent, and you say, okay, what do we do now? We have a patent. What do we do with this thing? Okay, you could market it. You could outsource the marketing. You get some marketing company or so and say, look, I have this thing here. I wanted to see if, to check around if you can get somebody to sell this to. It can do this, that. You explain to them what the uses of it, and you want them to get it on the market, and they go and do their thing. You could also present this discovery at a trade show. And I can tell you straight up that this is what happened with Lifesavers wipes. The discovery was presented at a trade show. You could also have direct communication. As a matter of fact, let me back up a little about the trade show. Generally, the trade shows are interesting because companies tend to send out their scouts to look around, go and check what is out there, check what these persons are presenting, and they check out the discoveries, and they're very keen. They come around and listen and talk to you and stuff like that, and then see if try to get an understanding of the potential of what you have. Can this thing go somewhere or not? So that's how that works, and that's powerful. You have also venture capitalists, which are basically scouts from companies, same way, walking around, checking out, looking to invest in ideas. Of course, you have to be very careful when you take on venture capitalists or you take funds from anybody. You could have direct communication or try to establish direct communication with potential partners. So let's say you develop a new cleaning agent or antibacterial agent for cleaning heavy grease. You could try to contact a company like maybe Clorox or Ajax or one of these companies, and seek out a meeting with the top brass of the company, and of course they'll bring along their scientists, and you have a discussion. Of course, generally you have an NDA, and they like to ask, do you have a patent for this type of thing? They want to know. And of course, like I said, you make sure you have your NDA. That's one way to go about it. And you could just decide that, look, I'll sell my patent or stuff like that. And I'll mention some stuff about that shortly. You could go the other way, or you could take another pathway, which is to launch a startup. But this involves some amount of work. And scientists, tend to shy away from this type of thing, because not because they don't have the ability, but because it takes them away from the lab. And scientists generally don't want to stay too far from the lab. So when they see all of this type of thing, they tend to shy away. But as I said, if you have an organization that allows or have a section that could deal with all of this, then that that could be very useful in terms of launching the startup, because as you can see, you have to work out a number of things. You have to put a proper plan in place for the business, look at the structure of the business and proper financial planning and all of that. All right, that is some distance from the lab. Now, instead of the startup, what you could do, you could just look at licensing your stuff to a company. This is where you basically establish an agreement with a suitable partner and say that, look, you can take this and go and do your thing, and I need to collect some fees. All right. For example, you could do exclusive licensing. A lot of people tend to take this route. I'm realizing, because what you have is just one company. So say, for example, a Clorox or Ajax or a Medline or so, you give them an exclusive license. So they will be allowed to use this patent. Just that company alone is allowed to use this patent and do the manufacturing, and you and them work out some sort of royalty agreement. All right. Or you could do some sort of sub-licensing, wherein you allow the licensee to even give another company a license. So let's say your license is your product to, let's say, Seprod or so, right? You allow Seprod now to issue a license to another company, a smaller company, or even a company of the same size, but Seprod is controlling the overall thing and allowing another company to make use of the patent. You could have non-exclusive, where you could license, you could allow multiple persons or multiple organizations to make use of the patent. And then you have compulsory. Compulsory is, for example, when let's say you worked on something, or you discover something like a vaccine. Let's say a COVID-19 vaccine. Then the government of the country could basically instruct you to allow a number of companies or one company to make use of the license, because it's an emergency, it's a national emergency. It will affect the entire nation, right? It's not that the government would have taken your stuff away, because you'll still be paid, right? But they are saying, let's move quickly with this. Allow such and such company or companies to produce the vaccine. All right, it's still your stuff. They are going to pay you, but allow them to do it quickly. All right. And then now, of course, you have your cross licensing, where let's say, for example, you discovered an electrode, and that electrode is making use of another patent. You're making use of another patent. So, you have to consider that, because in making your stuff and in licensing your stuff, you have to also give account for the fact that you are using somebody else's discovery or discoveries. All right. Now, this type of thing takes some work, and so normally, you make use of some sort of attorney or licensing clerk. So you have to have an organization to deal with this. A single scientist or one or two scientists, would not want to get into this, because it takes a lot, and you have to be quite careful. All right. Of course, lots of persons will come offering money, because if the discovery is significant, right? If it's viewed as significant, then people will come offering money, and you have to be careful of that, because if you take the money and let's say the product don't deliver as promised, then there could be serious problems. Okay, there could be serious problems. There's also the problem of reputational damage too. And as you know, in the scientific community, damage of reputation, you might not come back from that ever. So you have to be careful of that, right? And the whole idea of fraud and stuff like that in moving a product from the benchtop to the conveyor belt. All right. Questions? Kept it as brief as possible.
Let me see. I don't see any questions. I have one myself for you. Where is your office? What
My
office?
office? It's let me tell you now. It's on the same block where the chemistry department's office.
So it's UE Mona.
UE Mona, exactly. Yes, I should have said that first.
Because we're international, right?
Yes.
Here, there's a lot from all over.
Absolutely.
Okay, my question is, what do you do to ensure this process is Nagoya Protocol compliant?
Nagoya Protocol?
Compliant with the protocol.
Well, to be honest with you, that's where I kind of depend on some organization like our IP office to kind of guide me with that, because this is not the type of thing as a scientist that you would be involved in on a regular basis, or you make use of an IP lawyer. So I would depend on expertise in that area. Come from a lawyer, my IP office. I have to be guided by them. They would know way more about all of this.
Well, I'm close by. We can have a chat sometime.
Oh, absolutely. I would appreciate getting some of your knowledge.
I presented on it yesterday, but
okay.
Yeah.
Come on, I'll definitely seek you out.
Okay, I'm at the Biotechnology Center.
Yeah, man, I know where you are. I'll seek you
All
out.
right. Anybody else? Craig Rattray?
Craig Rattray.
Can we have your question?
Craig? Yes, Craig.
There you go.
Yeah,
He's worked it out.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, so a quick question. The examples you referred to just now, most of them were geared towards hardware. So you look at, yes. So can you shed some light on things related to software? Because as you know, with the world, through interconnectivity, everything is shrinking, and ideas begin as software really. Nothing hard. It's just some of it is just conceptual, and then over time, things will evolve into becoming hardware. But there can be value that it can be extracted as from the conceptual stage. Could you just shed some light on how one can go about just basically, as you said, protecting themselves or protecting the product, as you put it? Thanks.
Okay, great. That's an interesting question. Because you're talking about now from the concept stage, before even the lab, before we manage to create anything, we probably just, if we're having a discussion in the lab or over beer about some idea. Let's say we think about some sort of anti-diabetic drug or something of the sort. Now that one is a little bit technical because we're just having a simple discussion, right? And I think this is what you're talking about, software, concept stage. How do you protect yourself or protect your ideas? Because you might have made an input and I say, oh, that sounds good, and then just take it and run off with it, and before you know it, yes, Peter is working on this same drug, similar chemical structure, everything, or if he's a computer scientist, you see him developing the same software that you were talking about. It's kind of difficult there because and anybody else in the room can help me with it, because how do you put a non-disclosure agreement over pizza? You're having a drink and you're having some pizza and say, okay, sign up this non-disclosure, seeing that we are going to discuss some new ideas. So I'm saying it becomes a little bit technical right there, and somebody can easily steal the ideas, and a lot of ideas come up like this, right? Something similar to this happened to me also, and then the person basically said it was their idea, but there were three of us there having the discussion, but what could I have done? I can say, look, no, man, but remember, I was the one who first said, let's look at so and so. But where is my proof, really? We were not recording. There was no, you know, that one is difficult.
And maybe it's not putting water not going down.
Yeah, that one is kind of tough, Greg. I'm not sure how you would, because we have not started working on anything yet. It's not like we say, okay, tell you what, we're going to write a software art. You'll write this part, I'll write that part over there. And we have some email communications where we can say, okay, here's the evidence. I was the first person that said that. Let us work on this project. You know? I know.
Okay, great. I know I've had instances of that as well, and I could only say that if you're at that very, very beginning point, you be careful who you talk with over
Yes.
coffee,
Yes.
because it happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
And also, I've had cases where I've worked on something with a project and taken it to a certain point, didn't take it further. Somebody else says, oh, can I take this? I said, yes, but remember me when you're publishing, not a sign, nothing. They just took it completely over. What could I do?
I just publish
You
it and
know.
nothing for you.
Yeah, they're like, I didn't start the idea, you know, so you do have to be careful. Here's one.
I think that's a
Dr.
delicate
Keela, I
point.
think was saying happened to us. No, that's not him, that's someone else. Happened to us here at STA. The colleague who attended a conference with us and took and developed an idea we discussed for collaboration. Yeah. So if you do discuss something, it makes sense to have it in writing. Even an email where you said, oh, we discussed this matter yesterday, remember? Yeah, so you have it in writing, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have two hands up. I have one in the chat. How can you protect the intangible? Also, how to benefit from non-commercial innovations. Boy, that one tough.
Yeah. Non-commercial. I think, let's say non-commercial, let's say, you gave me an idea, or we did some work together and a paper came from it. I think that's a benefit if you manage to get your name on the, you're a part of the publication.
Right.
You will put you on the paper, or if it's a presentation, you came up with the concept, and maybe I did the work on it, but the concept, you came up with it, and so we say, all right, Dr. Mitchell was the one who came up with the concept. Yes, and yes. Gave us some guidance, and therefore.
And I think that helps if the person then tries to get a patent, you can say, listen, my name has been attached to this from however long.
From the beginning, yeah. Yeah.
All right, now you have three hands. Doc, you wanted to say something? Barrett?
I was just following up on for clarification. When we look at non-commercial innovations, let's say we're talking about some of these innovations that we see in some of the social sectors. And while they're beneficiaries and there is some value added to the beneficiaries, it's really non-commercial in the sense that people are not really making money from it. It doesn't affect your bottom line. And there's always a challenge, in some cohorts that we don't really recognize or give.
Well, then you have access to copyright and trade secrets. So you might not be able to use patent, but there are other methods.
Yeah.
Well, that begs the question again, to the first part of the question of the intangibles. These are sometimes social initiatives, social ideas, and outputs and products, and it's sometimes very difficult. I understand, Doc, what you're saying about trade secrets and copyrights and so forth, but sometimes there is a little bit of a challenge, and persons who are doing these innovations or creating these social innovations maybe do not recognize the importance of protecting.
Okay, I need to go on to the others, but remember
lot
we're
of time.
talking about commercializing of scientific innovations. I think what you're talking is kind of outside of the talk, because that would be non-commercial. That's a whole different kettle of fish, because it does lead to commercialization later on. And that's why I was asking about the Nagoya Protocol. Let me ask these two others that have been waiting. Nikisha, would you like
Hi.
to? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Peter. Nice talk.
Hi.
So one of the things I remember doing when I was working in a lab overseas was that we had these things where you could put your idea down on a paper and mail it to yourself in the post office
Right.
and never
That's a
open it.
copyright. That's a copyright.
Right.
Yes.
And so I know
Yeah.
that are the different levels of invention disclosure. Are those honored here in Jamaica? So for instance, if you have an idea and after you realize I just had a beer with somebody, I discussed my idea, let me just write it down now, put everything down, post it to myself, never open the letter. And if ever comes
If
up,
you
I have
pursue
a,
it, yes, because the JIPO office has a copyright scheme as well. You can actually register your copyright.
Yeah, I know about that.
And now our patent law has actually been updated from 1838 to 2000, and I think it's 18 or 19. So we are now compliant with the international patent system, which has that extra advantage. Okay, Craig Rattray.
Yes, I was the one who asked the question earlier, but I just want, it's not a question now that I'm going to be making or asking rather, but just a comment, and just by observing as a, well, I'm doing research as well, but in doing research on physical things, I recognize that while I'm looking at things, I was forced to look inward as well, to learn more of myself, because what I do is an expression of myself. And it comes out in the work, in whatever way, shape, or form. While we're working though, and while we're doing research, we must always remember that what we're doing is for the well-being of not of ourselves only, but also of everyone. And I understand why it was very difficult to give a response to the question that was asked earlier. But you see, at the end of the day, as I said, we are all working together, and there has to be something of greater value in terms of looking at one's life, or their general well-being. So that should be our guide as we move forward. I would think it may not mean much to some, but at the end of the day, if one is enriching themselves at the expense of the other, eventually it will short circuit the whole process of our existence, and we may not make it through.
Good point. You have to look at why you're patenting something, why you're trying to commercialize. It's really to give you a head start so that you can set up your business and be ahead of the game of the other people who might use. So if you're not going to use it, if you're not going to actually commercialize it,
some people just try to get ahead of the game so that they can ride on the backs of others, somehow. I mean, as researchers, we shouldn't stop. We go to a point and we just ride it through.
It's interesting. Okay, do we have any other comments? Curtis,
just a quick one.
please.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nelson, firstly, thanks very much for that presentation. And secondly, congratulations on all of your achievements to date with your Lifesavers wipes. I was wondering how has the progress been with the commercialization of your wipes?
All right, the progress has been, I wouldn't say slow, because there are a number of entities, a number of companies who have expressed interest. We have had a few discussions with a number of them, and now we're at a stage where we're talking about a meeting with the projects team to actually, we have done some trials on the large conveyor lines. That's where you produce like 12,000 wipes and stuff like that. You know, we're coming from a lab model, and then we develop a prototype where we, you know, just, you know, put together a few wipes versus now a machine that is producing 12,000 and more. So we're at a stage now where we have to adjust things to fit into that, to produce that volume. You know, basically scaling up then.
Yes.
Right. So that's where we're at with one of the largest wipes manufacturers in the US, which actually supplies most of the wipes in the US, like a good 80%, even producing for other companies. And that's one of the things that surprised me. I didn't realize that a lot of times you have just one central company producing for 56
A number of brands.
Yes.
Mhm.
So you think that you have one company called Company X, and you think that Company X is no, it's actually one company.
Turn your head towards the mic because we're losing.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, you know, sometimes you think that, you know, you have one company and it manufactures.
Coming.
by itself. We don't realize that there's another company down the road with no big name on it that actually does the manufacturing for most of the big name companies. That was a little discovery.
Your sound is going and coming because you're turning your head.
Right, and I'm so close.
That's better.
Okay, right. So, you know, that was a little discovery for me. So now we are looking at basically selecting which of the companies to basically, you know, to license the product to.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks a lot. And I wish you continued success, Dr. Nelson, you and the team.
Yeah, man, much respect. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Any other questions? We're doing well with time. This is a big topic, but it is heartening to know that there are now several commercial companies that have come out of UE Mona.
Yeah.
My doctorate student has her essential oil business, doing very well. You're now doing very well, and there was this other one, auto computing as well. So we're slowly getting there, and we just have to keep learning from each other and put in those agreements that will help us. I don't know if we need some white papers from everybody of their experience for the next generation coming up.
Yeah.
We'll have to see what we can do about that.
I think it's good to hear the experience and experience from different persons, and I have been listening to a lot of persons who have gone ahead and done these things.
I know of at least 4 companies coming out of UE Mona FST, which I think is very good, and that's recently, like in the last 5-10 years.
Well, that's good news.
And that's only the ones I know. I think there are others.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Any other comments? All right, we have a lunch break now. So you can go get your lunch. You have half an hour to get your lunch. And to be back for the plenary session at 12:30. So I think I'm going to let you off now. And thank you for being a wonderful audience and wonderful speakers that came on time and ended on time so we could get some questions. Thank you for this experience of being chair for this FST, UE Mona, St. Augustine, and all over the place, UE and UTech. I've really enjoyed listening to all the different talks. Thank you, and that's me signing off.